Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. My name is Becky, and I am an alcoholic. And I am so grateful to be in a meeting in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. I want to thank Stephen for the invitation and, on a personal note, for the daily connection that you pour into my life. Thank you for your ponderables. My sobriety date, by the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, is March the 10th of 2005. And I wish I could tell you that was my original sobriety date, but as my story will disclose, that is not the case. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I in turn sponsor women who in turn and sponsor women as well. The fellowship and the links of the chain of Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide, as we're experiencing right here in this room tonight. And I am so grateful for that. I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. I'm going to start with the end just a little bit today. I drove early this morning with about 7 million of my closest friends toward downtown Houston because I had a jury summons. And I was summoned to be on a jury, a member of society, in the mental court. And I found myself sitting there going, how did a drunk like me become cleaned up enough to qualify to get a jury summons and actually be considered? And I can tell you what the answer was: because of an amazing God and the unbelievable 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not get picked to serve on that jury, but I was honored and grateful to be a productive member of society today because of what Alcoholics Anonymous has done in my life. I didn't ever intend to join this fellowship. I didn't think I had a problem. I just knew I loved to drink. And I started drinking at the age of 14. I am one of 4 children. I am the only alcoholic in my family. Have a father that borderline could have been, I suspect, but that's his journey, or was his journey. He's no longer with us. I just know I grew up in a household of a lot of anger, a lot of yelling, a lot of tiptoeing around on eggshells. And when Daddy had just the right amount of beer, he was so fun, but you didn't want to be with him or around him once he crossed that line. And my siblings, I have an older brother, 5 years older, an older sister who's 4 years older. And then there's a tag along about 7 years behind me. And as my story will reveal, in my opinion, long before alcohol entered my system, her only intent in life was to come in and to ruin my parade, because I had alcoholic thinking long before I poured alcohol down my throat. So the older brother and older sister never caused a ripple or any type of problem. Once again, there are no other siblings in my family with alcoholism. There are some isms, though, because this is a family disease. And I will tell you that I drank like a fish, and most of my siblings tended to go toward the food direction. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that I have the disease of alcoholism, because there is a solution. So I started drinking at the age of 14. And I drank because it was fun and it was offered to me. And before I started drinking, I had made the decision, watching that Daddy that wasn't real nice and wasn't real pleasant after he crossed a certain line, watching him and thinking, I will never be like that man. The most hateful things came out of his mouth, the most horrible things, that eventually there'd be I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. But you just sat back and waited for the next time it happened. And I remember saying, I will never be like that man, and I'm sure not going to drink. But then alcohol was presented at the age of 14. And this is the early 70s when this happened. And I'm in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And there's much more to do now today than there was back in the early 70s. But that alcohol lit up my life. It was absolutely, to that point in my life, I can't tell you of anything that brought me more excitement, joy, and possibility. It just seemed that it was going to be the answer to everything. And so I pursued that with every breath in my body for years. But at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17, it is not readily available. But I can tell you, I am resourceful, and I found people that like to drink, and I drank more than they did. And I looked older, so I got to buy it. I had the fake ID. I got to buy it. So I had, what is it? Possession is 9/10 of the law. I got to decide how much you got because I bought it. I may not have paid for it, but I went in and I bought it. And so I would always drink the greater portion. And it never occurred to me. I never stopped to think that this might be a problem, because I was having a good time. And this was the age of disco and soon to be the age of urban cowboy. And, I loved the dance halls. I loved to be out in the nightclubs drinking and dancing. And I remember my mother looking at me one Sunday morning after I'd been out late, out in one of the bars, out in one of the clubs. And I had the dry heaves and I was so sick. Alcohol poisoning. I know that today I had alcohol poisoning. But in my mind, it was just the trade-off for the good time I had. And she was standing there and she's just shaking her head, just shaking her head. Oh, honey, why do you do this to yourself? I wasn't even 19 years old when that happened. And I remember thinking, I really do. I remember so clearly thinking, what is the matter with her? Doesn't she understand? Doesn't she understand? Because all that horrible feeling of the next morning was worth it for the fun I had the night before. But what soon happened to this budding alcoholic is I started having blackouts and I started having a few consequences. One brush with the law that was plea bargained down and never went on my record. And I got to spend the night in a jail cell and had my shoes taken and my cigarettes taken. And I sat there in shame and guilt and remorse and agony of what are people going to think when they find out and how am I going to live this down? And I never told. I got out. The only person who knew was the young lady that came and bailed me out and then loaned me the money to get the attorney to get the plea bargaining done. And I went right back to the nightclubs and the bars and the parties. And I surrounded myself with people that just they enjoyed my company until I hit a certain point. And I soon got a reputation being a really fun drunk. She's a fun party girl. Becky's a party girl. But after a certain point, even my drunk party friends were saying things like, don't you think you've had enough? When's enough, Becky? Last time you were here, you drank up the rest of the booze that was in the bar. The others might have wanted to drink too. Why didn't you slow down? And I just changed friends, to be honest. They're going to start judging the way I drink, then I'm going to start finding other people to hang out with. And some of the consequences that started happening for me in those early years of drinking, there were broken relationships. There were so many lies. I couldn't keep my lies straight. I had to lie about why I didn't show up to work. I had to lie about why I had to leave early. I had to lie about why I was in the bathroom for 2 hours because, there's a terrible stomach virus going around. And Becky seemed to have that stomach virus about every other day. And so I'd lose that job. So I'd get a new job. And I always presented well on paper because I can talk up a blue streak and I can tell you that I can do the job. I may not be able to follow through and do it. And so I kind of had this ragtag resume of all these jobs that I landed in during the oil boom, but I could not keep because, to be real honest, I don't want to work. I want to be out in the bar. That's where the men are. That's where the fun is. And that's where the alcohol is. And I lived that way my whole from the age of 18 to 28. I wasn't just a bar fly. I heard a speaker say just recently, I can identify myself as many things, and alcoholic actually covers all of that. But the things that I did behind the push of going out and drinking and having a good time, this little Southern Baptist girl was not raised to act that way. I wasn't raised to leave the bar with strangers, go back to the same bar and leave with a different stranger. I wasn't raised to wake up not knowing where I was and wondering what in the world happened and how did I get here and where are my clothes. That was not the upbringing that I had. But that's the lifestyle that I soon that's how I lived. And in the course of this, I had done one thing right. I had one best friend that I hadn't gotten rid of yet. One best friend that, I'd pretty much imploded the relationship several times, but she just believed in me. And she would say things like, when you drink too much, you get really depressed in the next few days and then you go drink again. Don't you think you might want to look at that? And I thought about that when I finally made it to you guys and had the gift of sobriety that I've been able to keep with God's help for a few continuous 24 hours. I thought about that and I thought about it really hard, but I just thought she was overreacting. And she didn't drink. At least she didn't drink like I did. And she was a good party buddy because she'd always drive. But that friend helped me to get the next job and the next job and the next job. And I'm grateful to say that that relationship has been restored because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because toward the end, before I left Oklahoma City, that relationship was gone too. So I have no friends left, just coworkers, and I'm being transferred to Houston, Texas, where now I'm about 26 years old, 26, 27. And what I have decided is that it's Oklahoma City. There's something wrong going on here in Oklahoma City. Houston's going to be my fresh start. And when I get there, I won't hang out at the bars. I'm going to live a different life. But I could not drink. I had no idea I had alcoholism. I just knew I could not drink. So I ended up in Houston, and then I found the bars less than a week later, and the same pattern repeated. Rinse, wash, repeat, just hanging out in the bars. And some of the consequences that started happening for me in Houston, though, had a little bit deeper resonance. My mother, who was in San Antonio, asked me to quit coming to San Antonio because she never knew what was going to happen. And part of that's in 1988, my father's lying in ICU dying, and they find me passed out in the stairwell because I downed the vodka. Broke my mother's heart. Please don't come home and visit anymore, Becky. Not unless you're not drinking. And I could not drink, so I just quit going home. That was 1988, 1989. So I'm living in Houston, Texas. I'm working for an oil company. I'm about to lose that job. I got a part-time job at a pool hall, and I love it. I absolutely love it because now I'm with my people. I'm with my people who drink like I drink. The bar room smells. I can chain smoke cigarettes, and I can slug back beers, and I can hit shots all night long, and I can serve you, and I'm having a ball. So much of a good time that I'm not showing up at the day job. So I lose the day job, and I remember it kind of having a panic because, even when you drink and party like I did, there is the facts of life, which means you have to earn a living to pay your bills. And I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. I didn't know how I was going to buy groceries, although I didn't eat that much. I didn't know how I was going to buy my liquor. That's what bothered me. How am I going to keep up with the bar tab? So when he walked in the door and he said, "Hey, you want to go on a date? Would you like to bartend at my poker party?" Sure, because there's going to be alcohol involved. And 2 weeks later, we're engaged. And 5 months later, we're married. And in my mind, this is going to be, now I'm going to slow down. Now I'm not going to continue drinking like that because I'm going to be a wife. And I don't know exactly what that means because I hadn't bothered to pay attention to my mom and what she did, but I'm going to be a wife. And I had no intention of being a mother yet, but that came along soon after. But as the wife, what I ended up doing is, "Honey, let's not stay home and cook tonight. Let's meet at the bar and then go out to eat." Well, if we got to the bar, we never went to go out to eat. And so my deciding to change my lifestyle became, now I have a drinking partner and a designated driver every night. 2 years later, our son is born. And the alcoholism, this cunning, baffling, powerful disease that I suffer from, has escalated. It is built to a point that I have the shakes all the time, even when I'm drinking for the first several hours. My central nervous system is screaming for more alcohol. And when I'm detoxing off of it and screaming for it, my body's imploding. I can't hold food down. I can't hold food in. I can hold liquor down after I throw it up the first time. So I have at this point, my son's almost 2 years old. And, this particular drunk wasn't any worse than any other drunk, other than I vaguely remember calling one of the radio stations and cussing them out because it kept playing the Spice Girls, and that really pissed me off. But the next day I woke up and I'm so sick and I'm so shaky and I can't put together a coherent thought. So I call my pastor at the church that I'd continued going to, even though I was going in hungover or still drunk from the night before. And I told him I thought I had a little bit of a drinking problem. Maybe I drink too much. And he told me he had a brother who was an alcoholic. They went to Alcoholics Anonymous and it saved his life. And I was just desperate enough and just miserable enough to think, well, I'll give it a try. That was March the 23rd of 1994. And I'm here to tell you that that's all I did was give it a try. I showed up, new dress, new hairdo, fake fingernails, tanning bed tan, walking skeleton because I wasn't holding food down and thinking I'm looking good and I'm going to walk in and convince all you people that there's really not that much wrong. And instead, what I heard was this. I heard the language of the heart. I heard you talk about your drinking and what happened. And everything in me is starting to light up, not because I want to go drink, but because I want what you have. I want the peace of mind that you're talking about. And you start talking about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and getting a sponsor and keep coming back. And then I also heard stick and stay, stay and stick. I kept hearing all these things and I wanted that because I'll tell you that trail of disasters that was behind me, it was all right up in my back. It was right pushing at me and I wanted what you had to offer until I had to do the work that was suggested. I'm so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous that you said keep coming back and that we don't shoot our wounded and that the solution works when you work it. I stayed around the rooms. I was not in the rooms. I was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought I was, but I hung around the rooms for almost a year, one day short of a year. Then when for sufficient reason, suddenly the thought occurred that sake is an alcohol. And if I eat sushi with it, I won't get drunk and nobody will know. And then I'll just go back and act like it didn't happen. And then for the next 11 years, I picked up desire chip after desire chip. I was able to put a year together 3 different times. And I believe I made a good faith effort, at least one of those 3 times, to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to see changes happen in my life. And what happened as a side effect of that, I have a family who desperately wants their mother and their wife back. And I kept building up their hopes and tearing them down by picking up another drink. I will be forever grateful for the bottom, the spiritual bottom, the emotional bottom, and the physical bottom that I hit on March the 9th of 2005, because I knew where the solution was. But here's the danger of being an in and outer. Here's the danger, and all I have is my experience, strength, and hope of being someone who comes to the rooms and tells themselves they're in Alcoholics Anonymous. I believed it would work for you, but it wouldn't work for me, because I believed the delusion and the illusion and the lie that my disease told me is that I'd been in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm here to tell you today that meeting makers make it when they do the work. I was going to meetings, but I was not doing the work, and I had not had a spiritual awakening or a psychic change. I was still bodily, mentally, physically different from my fellows because I was still untreated alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Something happened for me, and I believe today it was divine intervention on March the 10th of 2005. And that divine intervention was somebody who'd been watching me spin in and out and said, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous does not have a revolving door. Please stay. Please listen like only the dying can. Looked at me when I raised my hand one more time. Because I'm no longer a newcomer. I've been in the rooms. I'm a retread. I raised my hand. I drank again. Nobody was surprised. Some of the same looks. Most of it was love and compassion. But this gentleman, when I said, I don't want to live like this anymore, he said, are you done? Are you done? And he'd been in that meeting back in March of 1994. So he'd been observing. And I finally spoke the truth. Instead of saying what I thought you guys wanted to hear, I spoke the truth, which is, I don't know, but I want to be. Please help me. Please, God, help me. And the one woman that I hadn't worn out by asking somebody to be my sponsor and then not doing the work, that was still in the rooms at that particular meeting, offered to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with me. And the miracle that happened that day by my telling the truth, it was like that little bit of key of willingness that we talked about in 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And step 3, that key of willingness, the door opened just enough for a shaft of hope and light to come in. And I started to see, because you guys, you know, you kept loving me. You kept offering me the solution. And this woman who was willing to sit down with me and take me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous did it with such love and such compassion. She didn't keep saying, she didn't throw up what had happened the 11 years previous, the 10 detox centers and rehabs. Now you can understand why I was so humored by being in the mental courthouse today. I was in 10 detox centers and rehabs. I know how to be institutionalized, but I didn't know how to stay sober. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous and the men and women who walked this path ahead of me that took me through the book, Julie took me to the book. She took me to the first page and said, this is exactly what you know about recovery. And she taught me and introduced me to the set aside prayer, for me to set aside everything I thought I knew, because I knew absolutely nothing, because I had not been able to stay sober. And slowly, day by day, because I desperately wanted to stay sober this time, and I was terrified to be at home. Every time I got out of detox and rehab, I went home, and it's the same husband, the same kid, the same neighborhood, the same problems, the same absolute chaos. And so I stayed at the club group that was open from 6 a.m. until midnight, day in and day out, reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, taking the assignments that were given, and beginning to get the freedom that had so long eluded me because I would not surrender to this simple program. What ended up happening, it wasn't immediate. It wasn't a glowing bush. It wasn't a light shine from above. But what happened was that hope that started to build from having 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, day by day, hour by hour, seeing that the love and compassion that had always been offered to me was still there, but that I had to do the work in order to get the results. The 24 hours started to add up. And as I approached that first year of 2006, where I would get a year coin, the fear, because I'd had it before, was so intense. And what I was told so lovingly by that sponsor is that you're not the same woman today. Because in the course of the step work, when my step one, that complete surrender, our big book talks about it on page 33. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic of my type, there's no middle of the road solution. There's no a little bit drinking here. Absolute abstinence through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Surrender happened for me. And then I had to keep surrendering on a daily basis. And the step two, the God of my understanding, that I found that power that you guys gave to me that I could connect with and plug into, wasn't the God of my childhood that I was terrified of and had been running from for up to that point, 47 years of my life. That power that I discovered was little bits and pieces of your God, your higher power that had been keeping you sober. And so I got to plug into that power and slowly start building a relationship so that I could then, with trust, turn my life and my will over to the care of that God, so that when that fourth and fifth step came with this sponsor, there had been 4 huge lies. And 2 of them should have ended my marriage and possibly had my child taken away. These lies were terrifically huge, and I had stayed drunk behind them for 11 years. And this sponsor nodded her head and said, I did that too on 2 of them. The willingness to finally tell the truth in the 4th step, so that when we got to step 5 and I processed that work with her, and that freedom that came from where I could look the world in the eye and be at one with my creator, that did happen suddenly and instantaneously, because I no longer had any more lies to hold on to and to drink behind. And that's what I was doing. I was holding on to those lies so I could keep drinking. So next came steps 6 and 7. And those weren't in the first 2 years. I'm a slow learner. I had to keep staying busy in and around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I picked up commitments. And first and foremost, I was given the commitment of being the greeter, stand at the door and welcome people, smile and tell them you're so glad they're here, and then go to the coffee bar and wash the coffee mugs, and then go empty the ashtrays. And then I was able to begin chairing meetings and giving back what you guys so freely gave to me. As step 6 and 7 worked those with my sponsor, as that was happening, and those character defects that she had helped me to find in the 4th column, the threads that she had woven together from my 4th step, the patterns that had kept me drunk and sick for so many years, she helped me to see the character defects that were blocking me from that power that I'd found in Alcoholics Anonymous. My selfishness, my self-absorption, my need to be a victim, my inability to tell the truth, either to myself or to another human being, and then ask with all the humility that I could find to have those removed. And then she lovingly said, all these character defects that she helped me to identify, we ask God to remove them, and He removes them according to what He determines, but that I then need to practice the opposite of those character defects, which led us into my step 8 and the list, which was endless, the list of those I had harmed. So many people on that list. And with the guidance of a sponsor, and if anybody is new in this room tonight and you're counting days, do not attempt this program without the guidance of a sponsor, someone who's been through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because she helped me to see the names on the list that needed to be crossed out and those that we needed to carry over to, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And we started with the hardest amends, which was to my husband, that cowboy that asked me out, that I moved in with, that two weeks later we're engaged and then married 5 months later. He had been through the hell of alcoholism, and our child had been raised in that environment. So that amends, the things that I was so terrified of facing, that I knew it in my marriage. Thank God for the God I found in step 2, because I literally fell back into a loving embrace that no matter what happens as a result of these amends, I know I'm going to be okay. I don't have to drink anymore. And what happened is the things that I imagined would be the result of me making those amends didn't materialize. Still married today, almost 34 years later. But a restoration began in my marriage that was unbelievable. After, and there are people on my 9-step list, on my 8-step list that I still owe amends to, but I'm willing to make those amends when God provides, and the internet, because the internet is an amazing tool to find those people that I harmed. I've been able to track down several of them and will continue to do that because I don't want to drink anymore. I never want to live the life I led before I made it to you guys to stay. My 10, 11, and 12, which I hear those as a maintenance test, but those are the life steps. That is the breath that fills my body every single day. My 10th step, all throughout the day, making direct amends, spot check inventory, immediately correcting when I can, with the guidance of God and my higher power God and my sponsor, that spot check inventory all throughout the day. 11, I'm so grateful that as a result of what should have been a disaster in many lives, resulted in this amazing virtual house of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to connect with women sisters of the heart on a every morning at 6:30 a.m. for meditation, and then use that practice throughout the day to stay connected to my conscious contact with God as I understand him. That conscious contact that keeps me sober on a daily basis, I then get to continue practicing that throughout the day. And my 12th step, I said I sponsor women. I also chair meetings and I hold a service commitment. But here's where I'm so very grateful for the repair that has happened as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't go through the bloody wars that happened, the CPS taking my child and finally getting him back, the near divorce. But what I can tell you is that in sobriety, after March the 10th of 2005, as those days started to add up, many things started happening in my life on life's terms, that I had before in those previous attempts. If this happens, I know I can drink. Those things started happening because life happens, drunk or sober. But because of Alcoholics Anonymous, when I was 5 years sober and decisions made in my drinking caused us to lose our house to foreclosure at 5 years sober, I called my sponsor and I said, how do I stay sober? And why is this happening at 5 years sober? And she reminded me, go to meetings, read the big book, work with others, clean house, Serenity prayer. Do the Serenity prayer, Beki. And you know what you do? Is you get up the next day and you go on with your life and you stay sober and you show up for your commitments. That was it's been a few 24 hours ago, and it would end up being the best thing that happened. It got us out of a ghetto into a different area. And the mysteries of sobriety, the mysteries of my higher power, lost the house to foreclosure, living in an apartment that then gets swept away in Hurricane Harvey, and I didn't have to drink. And the next year, later that year, my mother became very ill. And that mother who asked me to quit coming home because she couldn't stand, and she said it also, I can no longer continue to watch you kill yourself, one drink at a time. I got to go home and be with that mom and sit by her bedside and be the daughter that she'd always wanted. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps brought about a change that I no longer went to see what I could get. I went with a heart of service. How can I help you, Mom and sister? So I got to be with my mom at the end of her life. Going back real quick to the amends. That father who died in 1988 when I was a raging full-blown alcoholic, passed out in the stairwell of the hospital. I got to go sit at his graveside and read my amends letter and get the freedom of knowing if he was one of us and never had the solution, he no more chose to be an alcoholic than I did. But I got to make my amends to him through a letter. As in 2019, mother dies. In March of 2019, later that month, my mother-in-law moves in with us, and I get to finally be the daughter-in-law that she needed in her life. For the last 4 years of her life, I got to sit with her and laugh with her. She never taught me to cook, much to her dismay. She wanted to teach me so badly, but that is not something I'm good at, and we both agreed on that. But I got to live with her, or she got to live with us the last 4 years of her life. And my sobriety date is March the 10th of 2005. I'm still a selfish alcoholic. As March the 9th approached and she was on her last few days of life, I asked God, please don't let her go on March the 10th. I don't want to associate my sobriety date with her homegoing the rest of my life. But she left this world and gained her freedom on my sobriety date of this year, March the 10th of 2023. And I was a sober daughter-in-law to her. I treated her with love and respect, and she gave back tenfold. She raised my child the first 12 years of his life. She raised that son. I'm so grateful for the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous and what my life looks like today. I get up and be of service. This morning, driving downtown Houston, I got that jury summons back in March when my mother-in-law was at the end of her life journey. And so I delayed it, not because I didn't want to go, because I get to be of service today and wherever God puts me, but I needed to be at home. And then I delayed it, and it hit in the summer months when I'm so busy at work. And so this morning, when I knew I had my jury summons, I got to go with a heart full of just show me what I need to do next. I'm open, God, whatever that looks like. And it was an amazing day of just being open to whatever miracles came into my day, knowing I got to end my day with you fine people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Today, one day at a time, I'm in a meeting almost every day. I don't need a meeting every day. I'm not afraid I'm going to drink. I just want to be there. I want to be with you guys. I want to be able to give back and hear the miracle and the solution and find out on a daily basis if the disease of alcoholism is still alive and well and it's still out there kicking. Just heard that right before this meeting. I've experienced it myself. We've buried 2 members of my old home group just within the last 2 weeks. I'm so grateful to be able to say that I'm a member in good standing. When I open the email in the morning that has all of the amazing information that comes from Stephen, I get to then share it with other members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am connected worldwide because of this higher power that I found that has placed me right in the middle. And I know with every fiber of my being, because I tried this deal living on the edges. And it's just like we always talk about. If you're on the edges, you get spun off. And there's some of you here old enough to remember the record player. If you're right in the center, the chances are you're going to bump into a few people as you're getting spun out the door. Today, my life is it's a symphony of recovery from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed at night. And I've held the same job for the last 15 years. Miracle. That's a miracle. I get to work with teenagers. Go figure. I also, that son that the last time I drank looked at me with such disdain and such disappointment. And really, his teenagers were very, very difficult because I sobered up when he was 12. And he didn't believe me. He didn't believe a word I said. And he'd been raised by an active alcoholic. He's now one of my greatest friends. He's 31 years old. He's living in our home again. And because of this program, I get to practice the principles with him and with you guys. I did not set my timer. So, Stephen, am I doing good on time? Okay, I'm good on time. That son, who, when he was really little, I had him labeled as an alcoholic, but you guys taught me I don't get to do that. But this is what I know. When he was 13, 14, I did everything wrong. I was dragging him into meetings and rallies and conferences because, he might be one of us. He sure looked like he was going to be one of us. And I was told by my sponsor, you're going to ruin the opportunity for his life to be saved if he actually has a seat in AA one day. So I took my hands off of it. And I don't know if he has a seat in AA, but I know that my stepdaughter does. And she's 14 years sober. And we have an amazing relationship because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I also know that if my son, or my grandchildren suffer from this disease, which I believe is genetic, and I believe I ignited it at the age of 14, that I want Alcoholics Anonymous to be here in its pure, amazing form, the same way it was for me the day I walked in 1994. I'm so grateful. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, but I have a solution today. And on page 43 of the big book, there's also at the bottom of page 43, it says, once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Time is not a tool. I'm an alcoholic. I have no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such defense. His defense must come from a higher power. I will be forever grateful for the higher power that you guys gave me that continues to grow and enlarge. And, I've heard it said, God hasn't changed. He's the same God he was yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But my perception of him has changed. And I had to get the alcohol out because even God can't fill something that's already full. That spirit of alcohol had to be removed so that God consciousness could then begin to grow and change and continue on a daily basis. I will be forever grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, there is a conference coming up in January. It's our CETA convention, which is Southeast Texas area. And I'm so excited to get to go and be with, I'm going to meet people in person, in the flesh, that I've only known through the virtual rooms. What a miracle. What a blessing. I can't wait for that. And I can't wait to see you guys the next time that I log in and one of your faces in one of these meetings. Thank you for not giving me my life back, but for giving me a life beyond imagination. I'm so grateful for Stephen for inviting me, and I love you all. Thank you for my sobriety.